Working Cows Podcast, episode 140.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Conry, host of the Working Cows Podcast, here with another episode powered by the Global Ag Network. And I'm excited to be joined today by a couple of guys from Performance Livestock Analytics and Performance Beef. Performance Livestock Analytics started as an idea of the co-founders as they looked for a solution to better automate data and analytics for their own family livestock operations. Unable to find a solution, they created their own, and they have started with this application that is making it a lot easier to collect accurate information about what is fed, and some huge benefits for the people and the finances side of a livestock operation. And so really excited to talk to them today. So really want to welcome Justin Sexten and Dane Kuper from Performance Beef. They had a very quick and successful start that allowed the team to grow and better serve a growing customer base. And the easy-to-use technology that they have developed has simplified feeding to financials for more than 1,700 producers across the United States and Canada, as well as a few international markets. In early April of 2020, Performance Livestock Analytics was acquired by Zoetis to help them accelerate progress in precision livestock farming, improve sustainability of producers' operations. And so we're excited to talk to them today. As I said, we're improving finances, we're improving people relationships and some of those things with this tool, and excited to see what they have in store for the future. So, Justin, Dane, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to join.
So we're talking today about Performance Beef Analytics and the tool that you guys have developed and that you've been using. Could you tell me, Dane, a little bit about how the company got started and kind of some of the early wins that you guys have been experiencing?
Yeah, for sure. Really, it's really was a ground roots process. You know, I grew up on a livestock farm in the state of Iowa. Early in my career after college, spent most of my time within my early career with high growth startup technology companies, mainly on the West Coast. And really looking back at the farm and the livestock industry, it was very evident to me that they just lacked the technology resources they needed to be more efficient and run their operations better, as we were in other aspects of our lives, or as you've seen in other industries. So something that was, a personal interest to me was the roots of where I grew up. And so we just went to work.
And what was the process? What was the starting point for you guys as far as looking at the industry and why, I guess, Justin, if you can jump in on that, why did you start with the feed part of it?
Yeah, feed was really a logical place to start because in many operations, it's the highest expense to the enterprise, but also it's the one thing that happens every day. And so that feeding is something that each and every day you go out to do, and how you can combine technology to get records from the feeding enterprise, but at the same time be connected to your nutritionist as well as anybody else in the enterprise who maybe is doing the feeding or keeping records on any other aspect.
And Dane, what problem would you say that the product is solving in the marketplace? What are some of the challenges that people are facing on their operations that Performance Beef Analytics is helping to solve?
Yeah, I think there's a couple answers to that. Holistically, we are helping that livestock operation just better execute on running the business through good data management. And so that every decision they're making shouldn't be through just intuition or a bias, that they're actually looking at the data and executing based on what their break-evens are, what the numbers are telling them. So holistically, we wanted to provide data management that allowed these livestock operations to become savvier in running their businesses. But it's dual purpose. Fundamentally, when we started with feeding, we wanted to automate the workflow of the process of feeding every day through a digital experience in the most easy, seamless way possible. So we wanted to actually help them do their daily workflow in a faster and easier manner.
How would you say that the tool is helping them to make better decisions? Are there some visualizations that come along with it that help them to see what the data is saying, or how are they better able to interpret the data and make better decisions with the tool?
Well, they're able to analyze their operation and their numbers at a real-time basis at all times. And that effectively empowers them for that better decision-making, because if you think of an average cattle producer, he may have 10 different groups of cattle on feed. They're all bought at a different purchase price. The cost of gain may be different, and they may be actually going into different markets when you think about the marketing and the decision-making along the way. And so you see variables that change quickly. Today, we're in an environment to where modified distillers and distillers as an input is becoming less available. They're having to make those ration changes in the platform. How is that affecting them on their gains, their cost of gains, to make it sure as they're making risk management or marketing decisions that they know, hey, these are what the animals weigh. Here's what our break even is. I know the data. I know the numbers. I can go execute on that marketing decision. That way I never miss an opportunity. So it just allows them to always be real time in the aspect of using data to make those decisions, which just empowers them.
Could you give me an example of how that data has served a user?
Yeah, I think we had a great example here just this month. I had a nutritionist call me. He was working with a feedlot client that has had some past financial struggles within his operation, and he needed to operate in a very base hit manner of making sure he executes on making a profit on every group of cattle, or his operation was at risk. And if you look at today's scenario, you have a massive drop within the Chicago Board of Trade live price of fat cattle. There's a lot of producers that are suffering because of that, but this producer in general is not suffering. He went and made those risk management decisions. He had forward contracted his cattle. He knew the numbers. The market had moved to a point to where he knew he made a profit based on what Performance Beef was showing him on the rate of gains of his animals and what the cost of gains were. He was confident in that. He used the data to go make that decision. So while many of the rest of us are sitting here looking at selling cattle at a loss, right, this individual was actually able to use the platform to empower him to be confident on going and making that decision. And so those are things that just hit home, right? This was all or nothing for this operation when you think about his operation could not support another devastating loss within his financials on a group of cattle. Well, a lot of people are suffering those last losses today. This producer is moving forward. So it feels so good to hear those type of stories and empowering a producer like that to continuing to be sustainable on his farm.
Could you, either one of you, give me kind of a rundown of what the flip side of that situation would look like for somebody who was still keeping records on a notebook and transferring them into a spreadsheet and some of those things?
I think the way I would look at it is you can make those decisions, and that a person keeping very detailed records in a written format can sure make the same decisions that Dane illustrated. But really, the benefit of Performance Beef is data input is automated, and there's nothing more painful for a producer to do than come in after the work that is enjoyed of daily chores or just taking care of cattle, and then set down to an evening of data entry. And so it's not that those same decisions can't be made with written records. It's those records that we're collecting every day in an automated way as we're feeding cattle are translated into actionable decision points without having to go through the process of entering how many pounds of each ingredient were fed and what group of cattle that's allocated to, and then figuring the financials. And so it doesn't necessarily change the decision, it changes the ability to make the decision and the work that's required to get there.
I'm calving my dad's cows right now, and I've got a calving book in my house that never leaves my house because I know myself well enough to know that there's a potential of it getting lost if it did leave my house. And there's, at this point, 70 some odd records in there that I couldn't possibly recreate without that. Having that possession. And so I think there's probably some of that risk is also mitigated with a tool like Performance Beef, right?
Yeah, that's actually one of the great benefits of the platform is that the minute that the feed input is captured, the person who's doing the billing can issue a bill in real time because the data is sent to the cloud. It's captured and transferred across the operation. And so a calving book is a great example of, if the calving book ends up in the washing machine, the data is clean, and that's about the extent of it. Whereas in a case like Performance Beef, we capture the data, and as soon as that data is captured, everybody on the operation has visualization to it, as well as your trusted advisors like your veterinarians, nutritionists, and even bankers can look in and help you make informed decisions without you having to shift files back and forth or share handwritten records.
Dane, could you talk a little bit more about kind of the early days of the company and kind of the hustle that went into acquiring your first customers and seeing how they were using it and some of the early adopters?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for us, we knew what our mission was and we knew what we needed to do, right? We needed to put a user experience in the hands of our customers that was so easy that anyone could do it. And so my partner, Dustin Balsley, he really focused on designing the user experience for the look and feel of the application. And, it was kind of fun. The first thing we always did was take it to his dad. His dad was not one that was always went to software and was used to it. And we knew he would be honest, he would fight it, and we needed to see if it would work for him. And, Dustin's kind of got a history within his career of building user experience and making a workflow that's really easy and conducive to the market. And so, obviously that was his role here in designing it and building it out. And, we knew we needed to automate that feed workflow first and foremost, right? So we made this Bluetooth connection to the scale head on the feed wagon and actually used a cellular iPad interface. So our customers today use a cellular iPad to feed their animals every day, right? They're looking at that iPad as they're loading those ingredients. So we wanted to automate that process of loading the ingredients, remove the calculations of it, and actually delivering those ingredients, because that daily input cost of feed, how much feed went to which pen, all drives the growth model of the animals, drives your cost of gains, drives your financials. So we knew we had to just focus front and center of tackling that. And so luckily we put it into our first customer's hands, and it really just kind of took the market by storm. The customers, I always say the customers were ready for this before we were to market. They were using technologies in every other aspect of their lives. Generally, if you look at row crop, there's an iPad in the cab. There's digital mapping, right? These guys are walking around with smartphones, checking the markets, but yet they had multi-million-dollar business enterprises that were pen and paper, and they were volatile, capital intense, but yet we were pen and paper. So we knew we needed to automate that workflow, and luckily, like you said, we kind of hit that network effect. We put it in the hands of one customer, and the ability to go feed their animals every day became easier with our interface, and that's rare, right? I think when you see with ag tech and technology in general within agriculture is that software and technology kind of can be an extra step. and it can be laborious to go manage your data on it while you're trying to actually go complete your workflow. And it comes a separate job and duty. Ours was simultaneous in the sense that we made it easier for them to go feed those animals, and we were able to capture the data that we needed to help them look at their financials and make those business decisions. So it hit one customer and it went to the next. And really our initial growth, and even as you look at our growth to date, it's been through that network effect, word of mouth. And so it's what we say about it is one thing, but it's what your customers say about it that's another thing, right? Mm-hmm. That truly tells the story. And that's a fortune we have here, is that our customers have really helped us grow and tell the good story.
It's always handy to have that focus group share a last name. You can go over to them and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" I used to do that with the podcast in the early days. My dad and I'd be driving somewhere, and I'd just put it on and say, "Hey, what do you think of this? Is this scratching where you're itching? Is this what you're looking for when you're driving down the road?" And so that's a handy little advantage there.
Absolutely.
Justin, could you talk about some of the ways that this helps people maybe more accurately predict the weight of an animal, or keep track of the weight of an animal as they are being fed, and know maybe when it's time to take advantage of a market situation?
Yeah, it's one of the aspects of the tool is it captures the actual ingredients that are fed to the animal, and then you preload it with the information about the animal. And so we have a machine learning growth model that is doing daily predictions of animal performance. So it's incorporating that user data automatically as the feed is delivered. It's grabbing weather data from your location and puts together a daily prediction of average daily gain. And so really what you have is real-time information as to how those cattle are doing. And at the same time, you're capturing all the financial information. So what the cattle cost, and anytime you process them, as well as ultimately those feed costs. And so you have a running real-time break even each time you wrap up the day. And so that provides a marketing opportunity where, that you may intend it on selling those cattle as finished steers, or you may find that there's a marketing opportunity where selling them as heavy 8 weights is a better option. And so it gives you that optionality that's needed in a volatile marketplace that we see today.
If I can just ask the bottom line question, what has been the accuracy of that prediction over time?
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how accurate you can get when you're capturing data real time, right? So if we think about what a traditional projection would look like, right, we would anticipate what those cattle, or we would know what those cattle weigh coming in, and we're going to project what they're going to do on the way out, and we'll predict what we think the nutrient composition of the feed is in the middle, right? So we really have kind of one data point that's leveraging both ends. And so the accuracy of the machine model really picks up on maybe one day you feed more corn than you do hay. And so the cattle performance actually would reflect that increase in energy density. And there's other days where maybe you put too much hay in, and so the diet's diluted in that case. And so, that over time balances out, but we capture each of those nuances as well as those cold weather events or hot weather events that impact cattle performance to really dial in on that performance of each of those pens. Now, clearly, you're going to have variation around pens of cattle, and we all know that there's variation of one animal to the next in the pen. But on a group basis, the accuracy is quite solid in terms of making those marketing decisions that you need to in real time.
What's been some of the feedback, Justin, if you can again share some of the feedback that you've received from producers as far as how this tool is benefiting them?
And probably the most common feedback that you hear is just how much time it saves them, in that before they were making out feed sheets and tracking down recommendations from their nutritionists. And then after all that was done, if they wanted to generate a closeout, they had to ultimately, sit down and figure all that out. And now that workflow of feeding captures all of that information in real time. And so there is not that data entry component. So that part that none of us really enjoy, data entry, is simplified in the daily workflow. And that is really the first initial savings. It's like, I just have all of this time, or I now have more information at the same time input. The second one is one we hear a lot of for people who are doing custom feeding or feeding for somebody else. The biggest feedback there we get is just how much shrink and accuracy in their billing and invoicing they're able to do. Because if you put, if the diet calls for 600 pounds of distiller's grains and you load 660, many times that feed sheet didn't get updated with that 10% overfeeding. It was, if that's what it was called for, I got as close as I could. Right. But if you dump 660 pounds of feed and you're supposed to hit 600, we capture 660. And so that 10% shrink in just that example is captured for that custom feeder in an automated way, where when he sends the invoice, the customer knows that data was captured automatically. It's valid, it's verified, and I'm able to actually capture true shrink as opposed to some estimate. So between the time savings and just the accuracy of data capture, those are really the two key points that we see from users.
And how does the piece where the nutritionist and the other folks that are kind of on the outside of the orbit of your operation, how do they get access to this information?
Yeah, so as a nutritionist, I use myself as an example. As a nutritionist, the customer that I'm working with shares access to their account. So it always goes back to the customer. They have the decision as to who gets access to the account. But if you think about this situation we're in now, where many of those nutritionists, either one, depending on who they work for, aren't allowed to travel or are not traveling just to minimize risk, now can sit down at their kitchen table while they're drinking coffee in the morning and look at their 30 customers and look at how those cattle are performing in real time. So they can see the daily intakes pin by pin, looking in because the customer's given them access. And Dane mentioned earlier, the distiller's grains availability has provided a real struggle for many producers, in that they get a 2-day notice that 30% of their diet is now no longer available. And so we have nutrition groups that are, they're doing 4 times the number of ration changes they would in over a month's time. They're able to do that remotely and to monitor how the cattle respond to that change without ever leaving their house.
One of the big things we like to talk about here on the Working Cows podcast is the quality of life. Really that's what it comes down to. I've shared my story before here on the podcast. I shared a little bit of it with Justin, but I kind of didn't enjoy the ranching part of my life growing up because it was always on the weekends, because both my parents were hustling town jobs to make the ranching dream come alive. And I have immense amounts of respect for them, and knowing what I know now, to know that my parents basically started from nothing in the first generation in the 80s and made it, that's kind of a really big feather in their cap. And I've come to appreciate all of that. But how has the quality of life improved as a result of implementing performance beef into the operation, Dane?
Yeah, like Justin said, the time savings of that daily workflow, right? These guys have a ton of things they're trying to do every day. It's labor intense. If we can make that day easier, it really helps that quality of life. And we've seen in a lot of cases, they enjoy it a little more. right? They're able to actually compete on the farm of who's feeding the cattle and who's being more accurate because they're watching each other feed in real time. You see jokes go back and forth about, hey, look how accurate I was, nailed it right on, or man, you were way over on this, and almost some gamification on farm of just enjoying that experience of feeding cattle, watching each other do it, kind of competing with each other to be as good as possible. And so that's kind of neat. And so we've seen a lot of that, and it's connected those employees more on farm, and it allows the owner operator to be able to step away too without the worries that he initially had. We've got pictures on Snapchat and Twitter of guys sitting in Mexico that were on vacation watching their temporary help feed. And just the thought of being on vacation, knowing that they're fed on time, that it is accurate, is something that is rest assuring for them, that they still have access to their farm even though they're not there, right? So they feel like they can get away more. I think, fundamentally, like I said, it helps them just better run their business. A lot of these small, mid-size operators or at any size are trying to figure out, what's their path forward in this whole deal, right? Where do they come out on the other end of this pandemic, these suppressed cattle prices, and how can they improve how they run their business? And we see data management as a big part of that, is that, there's less guesswork, and we take the stress out of capturing that data and using it to help them make decisions. For me, that's a personal experience on my farm. How would I ever feel like I could have my cattle operation without true data management and figuring out how I make these decisions?
Yeah, I've seen that, in real time for myself. I'm a member of the South Dakota Farm Bureau Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee, and Brian Mose of Mose Feedlot near Watertown, South Dakota, is also a member of that committee. And I think we're going to be talking to him coming up on the Working Cows podcast in the near future. But I've seen that quality of life improvement in his operation as a result of Performance Beef. He like you're talking about, he has people when he's gone that come in and do the feeding for him, whether it's his dad, who is usually occupied with other things, or a hired person to come in from the outside the operation if both him and his dad are gone, and he can sit there and watch in real time things being loaded, things being fed, know which pens have been fed, what they got, and kind of see that performance in real time. So that's a pretty big release of stress for him in being part of a committee that does demand some travel and being away. I think that's freed him up to do that on his own.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see that time and time again. It's a huge added benefit.
One of the things that got discussed quite a bit early on in the Working Cows podcast was what's going to kind of be that game-changing technology that comes in to serve this industry. Like you talked about, Dane, earlier, this industry is underserved typically by technology, and you've got, especially on the row crop side, you've got precision planting, and you've got lots of different technologies coming to bear in that industry. Justin, could you talk a little bit about the value of Performance Beef to the livestock industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact it's had from an industry perspective, it is successfully demonstrated that it doesn't need to be complicated and expensive to be transformational to the industry. And that, we have a number of users who would say, well, I can't adopt technology because it's too hard to learn, and that, they have an experience from some other technology that they use as an example. But we have some users that pride themselves on being technologically adverse and having figured it out, that first day they were feeding. And then, the infrastructure and cost to run Performance Beef is so affordable that it is easily adopted. It's rapid setup. And so I think it's just been a bellwether to other forms of technology to say, if the user experience is great and it provides a needed service, the opportunities across the beef industry for technology are endless. And that really just driving it through user function and easy to set up, really just it's exciting to see where technology will go inside the beef industry.
What about traceability? I imagine that this has an impact in that regard, with kind of the accuracy and knowing exactly what went where and when, and kind of all the other things that play into it, as you've mentioned, weather and some of those things. How is that being influenced through performance beef?
Yeah, as we think about the implementation of the animal health enhancement that's coming this fall to performance beef, and individual animal tracking that will also come with that. Traceability is a very logical next step. And so, the consumer is more aware of where their food comes from today than perhaps ever before, for reasons maybe we don't like, but that's the reality. And so, not only do we provide now a connected platform where the cow-calf segment can transfer information to the feed yard and the feed yard down the line, because that data is now moved to the cloud, and so it is transferable. And so now, cow calf operators can communicate those value added practices that they've done on the ranch and invested in those cattle to the feed yard. And as Dane said, the feed yard now can make an actionable decision on that data. Always before, you really didn't know, but connecting those segments through a common platform now allows us, really to transfer that information beyond just standing on the auction block and saying they've had all their shots. And that's really the exciting opportunity from a traceability standpoint is you can transfer information that saves each segment money, but also you can transfer from one segment to the next traceability at a level that the consumer wants. And so it may not be on all the cattle, but it may be on a segment of the cattle that we see the market driving that value proposition. And the exciting part about it from an industry perspective is that information is not going to really come at an additional cost. It's going to come in the natural workflow that exists inside the platform itself.
And Dane, Justin just mentioned some exciting changes coming this fall, many of which are kind of in connection to the recent acquisition of Performance Beef by Zoetis. Could you talk a little bit about some of the things that you see on the horizon as a result of that recent acquisition?
Yeah, so our new joint venture here with Zoetis to the acquisition. Really, as we look at our business, we've had such great market adoption and traction in the industry. If you look at 1,700 plus customers that wake up every day and feed their animals through our platform in real time, and over 3 million head of cattle, we know we're onto something here, right? And we knew we had such great traction, and for us, we were really jumping into that next big growth phase as a business, right? And so, today we're excited to say, hey, we're aligned with the largest animal health company in the world to make this next step transition into driving more value through the platform, offering more solutions to the market, and being in more geographies, while having the expertise and vision and mission alignment from Zoetis. And so for us, it was such a great transition and decision for us as we take this next step, is that culture and visions were so aligned. We'll be better positioned to continue to grow and address the livestock market with our technology at a more global scale, and to create a connected pharma experience. Today, if you look at the animal health and the continuum of care of the animal, it's a disconnected ecosystem. And so with Zoetis' mission within precision livestock farming and the continuum of care, with technology and data analytics being a big part of that continuum of care of how we make decisions to improve the well-being of those animals, there was such good alignment. And so they're backing behind us as we launch our new animal health, individual animal management capability of the platform. It'll be a big deal. And it's going to be great for the market, right? Because it's going to be bigger and better. It's going to allow us to do more for the livestock industry.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit more about the new health platform that's anticipated this fall, Justin? If you would kind of share a little bit about what that's going to look like and what some of the anticipated new functionality that you see there.
Yeah, the Animal Health Edition is really exciting component, Clay, and that now what we've taken to the nutrition side of the business, we now take to the animal health and ultimately veterinary community. And so one of the things that probably the greatest functionality that will come with animal health is the ability to set up protocols and plans inside the platform. And so you can think about those kind of the same way as, how a nutritionist would interface with a ration. A veterinarian can go into that customer's account, or the customer can share their account with their veterinarian and say, these are the four types of cattle that I'm going to buy: heavy steers, heavy heifers, lightweight, high risk, whatever that is, and develop specific protocols for each of those types of cattle. And then as the cattle are worked through our chute side application, we're going to capture all of those treatments and vaccinations in real time. So as the cattle come through the chute, the crew that's processing the cattle, they know what the veterinarian and the operator have set up as the protocol to use at arrival, for example. And as those cattle are processed, effectively all of those expenses and health records are captured in real time. And so as you're walking back to the shop or the house, effectively you have a full financial, nutrition, and health picture captured in that interface. And then the other way that you would interface with that is you'll be able to walk through the pen or the pasture, whether you're a stocker or backgrounder or a feeder, and you can type in the number of the animal that you see that you suspect may not be feeling the best, and you can look at his full health profile. And maybe he was treated 4 days ago, and so you go on about your way, but maybe this is the first time he's potentially been identified as having BRD or something of the sort. And so again, you eliminate that need for paper records, and you convey those records across the operation in real time. So I can diagnose a calf on one side of the yard, and you can drive around the yard just looking through the pens, and you'll see the note that I made in real time. So those are really the exciting aspects of animal health that will roll out this fall.
And is that chute side data capture, is that kind of an RFID tag type of reader? Is that how that's planned to be implemented?
Yeah, great question. So the RFID reader that we are using is an ultra high frequency model. So the read range is measured in feet as opposed to inches. But for those who have adopted that low frequency model, we're technology agnostic, in that if you have a low frequency investment, and we can pair with those stick readers that some operations already have in place. But we really think the opportunities in ultra high frequency going forward, just because when you have the ability to run a group of cattle through a 16-foot alley and read all of those tags, the opportunities to expand on that are so much more than if you have to be within 8 inches of them to read those EIDs.
Sure. And Dane, you've had some early access to this technology, as I understand it. So, what has your experience been with this new functionality in the application?
Yeah, I've got a 750 head feedlot set up here in Iowa, and we go any new technology we're testing or deploying, we go there first and test away. And so it's kind of the fun and entertainment of that. But through that testing, it's pretty interesting because you kind of saw it as a nice to have, maybe somewhat of a step change of a technology chute side. But, I would kind of explain it in the same way as the sense of when people picked up the iPad to feed their cattle every day. Once they used it for a week, they'd ask themselves, how did I even do this the other way in the past, right? They couldn't put it back down. And so it's this paradigm leap type experience. And for me, it was, honestly, for the guys at my operation feedlot, it was the same experience for them when you think about the chute side, is that every animal that's coming through the chute, you've got the weight metrics, any of prior animal history. That reader's automatically reading that tag. It's a full hands-off experience, and you've got the intelligence of that animal on an iPad chute side as you're working them through. And you're not having to touch anything. It's not slowing you down. And it's that experience of, man, when I run those cattle through the second time, right? And you start to understand each animal in itself. You go work the group the second time, and all of a sudden there's 3 that the daily gains are much lower than the rest of the group. Now, was that an animal I may have picked out for treatment there initially? Probably not, right? But could have used the treatment after the iPad was really showing us the analytics and you give a second look at it? 100%. So you start to see those type of experiences come into play. Like I said, it's that experience of I couldn't go back if I had to, right? Doing it the old way of just working cattle, not having any intelligence on those animals as we're running them through. It's a game changer. And I think we've seen that with our current beta sites and even vets that have been at the chute working cattle with these operations. They also refer to it as a game changer. So I think it's exciting for the industry, exciting for the animal health industry, and we think it's going to drive a lot more value to the platform for our customers.
Do you see this functionality increasing the ability to accurately predict current weights and rate of gain and some of those things?
Yeah, because every time you run it through, you get a weight metric on that animal, right? And so if they have weigh bars in the chute, we're getting that weight metric. So it's an opportunity for calibration anytime that animal goes through, right? If we're over projecting or under projecting, we're getting actuals on farm to help better curate that model going forward for a result and more accuracy at its endpoint. So yeah, absolutely.
You talked about machine learning earlier, Justin. I guess, Dane, if you could talk a little bit about, is that site specific, or is kind of all of the data from all of the clients helping to increase the accuracy of those predictions and those tracking of the weight? Is it everybody's data, or is it just the individual data that's involved in the machine learning?
Yeah, I mean, all the data feeds the model when you think about it, but we've actually got the machine learning to where it's picking up the tendencies of your farming operation, right? Your facilities may be different. How you bed your cattle might be different, right? How you manage them is different. And what we see is those tendencies are consistent on your farming operation. And so the model and the artificial intelligence actually picks up those tendencies or looks up your prior performance to the model and does that calibration or does that AI for your operation. And so, it's not a one model fits all. We can see those tendencies of how you perform to the model, and that model, you'll start to see that artificial intelligence calibration come into play on your farm to have a better prediction outcome for you. So that's exciting. Every farm's different. Everyone operates with different ways, and this allows consistent accuracy across every farm with this AI layer involved. So we're excited for that.
Justin, when can we expect to see this functionality kind of roll out to the broader public?
Yeah, we'll look to initially roll that out in August and see a bigger push as we move into September. And so really our focus on the functionality is those performance beef users that are on the platform today are really going to get the first look at it. And then as we work closer into the fall and the fall run, you'll see wide scale availability across the platform to new customers as well. So early August and then building from there.
And Dane, I think we kind of touched on the tech needs. Could you talk a little bit about how somebody gets access to performance beef? We talked about the cellular iPad and the Bluetooth
Yep.
device on the scale head. What else is involved in becoming a customer, I guess, Performance Beef?
Yeah, so the really for anyone interested, should just go to our website, performancelivestockanalytics.com, or they can Google Performance Beef. It'll bring it up too. And then just request a demo on our website, or they could call us directly on our support line, which is 515-337-2187, and someone can just talk to them directly. And also, we would encourage people just to follow us. If there's interest, you want to see how it's working on operations, follow Performance Beef on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And it's pretty neat on our Snapchat, our Performance Beef Snapchat. We do a weekly producer takeover. So it's kind of a real-time behind-the-scenes look at Performance Beef. You'll see current customers using it, taking Snapchats, videos of them using Performance Beef and how they use it on their farms. And you can kind of get a real-time look of how people use it differently within different areas of the country.
Well, I appreciate guys' time today. And links to all that will be at the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/140. So if you're interested in anything that we talked about today or any of the links that Dane just shared or the phone number, all of that will be up at the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/140. Anything that I've left on the table, any other major issues you guys wanted to talk about, any other things that you're excited about in the future as far as Performance Beef is concerned, anything like that?
No, thanks for the opportunity to talk today, Clay. Appreciate the podcast, and thanks again.
Thank you, Justin. What are your final thoughts?
It's just exciting to be on the show, but also it's exciting to see really where technology in the beef industry is headed. And so I encourage those who maybe are technologically adverse, as I was at one time, to look at the opportunities that are coming forward, because there really is some exciting things on the horizon.
Very good. Dane, Justin, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clay.
So check out the show notes page for links to all of those things if you're interested in partnering with Performance Beef and what you're doing in your operation. Some good opportunities there to see technology come to serve this sector of agriculture a little bit more than it has other sectors. So coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, I am going to do a solo episode talking about some things that I have been ruminating on as I've been going through calving season and doing some driving back and forth to get cows out to summer pasture and some of those things, some of the things I've been thinking about. After that, that solo episode is going to be a bonus episode. After that, we will have an opportunity to sit down and talk to Brian Alexander one more time about his progress and what he has been observing on the ground as he has come back around to that strip grazing place that paddock where he strip grazed in 2019, and now he's turned out his own set of Coriani pairs or calving Coriani cows in those areas, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he's been observing in those areas as he has brought the cows through there and how it compares to what it looked like before he went in there and some of those different things, and strip grazing experiment post-mortem part 2 with a little bit more information of how it actually recovered. So look forward to that coming up, episodes 141 and 142 respectively of the Working Cows podcast, closing in on episode 150 with a special guest that I had an opportunity to sit down with for a second time and record and understand a little bit more about some of the comments he made on his first appearance on the Working Cows podcast. So look forward to that coming up in the next few weeks. for now, though, I hope you are enjoying this spring time and really looking to foster some engagement through episode 141. So check that out whenever it drops real soon, again on the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.